the vault, high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Catholic. This is Marianela Nunez, and here with my colleague, Mike Bress. How are you, Mike?
Good. How are you, Marianela?
I am good. Do you like my new voice?
I do. It's improved slightly for the listeners. It was a different kind of voice when she came in on Monday, a little bit deeper, a little bit more, we'll say, throaty, as she was getting over a cold. But we, as I said in the beginning of Monday, as long as you're good by the recording on Thursday, I'm okay. So I'm glad you're feeling better.
I didn't want to have a peachy voice for this podcast, so I prepared for that. So this is why I sound this way, people.
A lot of lemon, a lot of tea, a lot of good nutrients to get you where you are. So I'm glad and it's a faithful week that you're doing that, because we are, for us here in the diocese and for many of our Catholic schools, we're sort of in the middle of Discover Catholic Schools Week, which is a big time for re-enrollment and specifically, Marianela, for your world of enrollment and retention and getting everybody geared up. It's weird to be only a couple months into school and be thinking about next year already. So how has that so far been going for you, Marianela?
Well, I think the one of the happiest thing for an enrollment director to do in a diocese is to be able to report increases on enrollment. So just finishing the NCEA report last month and being able to say we were able to increase this year overall was really nice to see and to report on. So for those who want to check out our increases, it's on the Star Herald paper. There's an article this week that I wrote, and just happy to share the good news with everyone. So that's something positive. And then just after that's done, it feels like, it's Discover Catholic Schools Week now, and we are ready to re-enroll. And we transitioned a couple of years ago from doing re-enrollment in January and started doing it in November. And a lot of our schools have been having a lot of success with that. And it's very interesting to see the progress and also the excitement from some of them that were actually hesitant to do it that early, but have seen good results with it.
Well, that's fantastic. Congratulations on that. And I think our guest today will have some insights on that as well. As we, I think for the first time for you and I together, we're bringing in a colleague that feels our, we'll say, joy and pain from time to time in the world of diocesan, school enrollment. So Marianela, who do we have today?
Well, so I did a little bit of research for this one and kind of likes to have a proper introduction. So today we have with us Kristin Moore, and Kristin is the Director of Marketing and Enrollment for the Archdiocese of Seattle, with a proven track record of increasing enrollment and community engagement through strategic planning and innovative initiatives. She is experienced in outreach and development of community partnerships, very reflective, flexible, and goal-oriented person. She's a leader, a teacher, a mentor, and also an advocate. Kristin Moore is the Director of Marketing and Enrollment for the 73 Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of Seattle. She's very passionate about Catholic education and has, devoted herself to the mission of Catholic schools in the Northwest. So with that, welcome, Kristin, to the Catholic Schools podcast here today.
Thank you, Marianela and Mike. It's so good to be here. And I have to just give a shout out. My parents live in Western New Jersey. So while I am a Pacific Northwesterner, I live just north of Seattle, but the Archdiocese spans the whole western part of the state from Canada to the border of Oregon. We have a pretty large number of schools spanning so many different counties. My heart is still on the East Coast, right?
Oh,
because my parents are there. Give a shout out. So anyway, sometimes being a little bit of a transplant to this area can sometimes be helpful because you have a different perspective, I think, coming in, knowing, I grew up in Catholic schools on the East Coast. So the West Coast does have its differences, but so many wonderful things. I've loved being out West here, and I'm just thrilled to be here with you to talk one of my favorite subjects, Catholic schools. So
yeah,
thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you, Christine. Just for our listeners to know, to how do we get to connect with Christine? I've I met Christine at Notre Dame at one of their conferences for Latino enrollment, and it was, I was so impressed with one of her presentations on the Madrinas model at the time. And we got to connect various times because I kept going to Notre Dame, and she was always present. And then in addition to that, one of our colleagues from the Archdiocese of blanking Mike, Nunez is at
Ohio.
Cleveland? Is she Cleveland?
Cleveland. Danae, don't kill me. Come on, Marianela.
When we have her on, you'll have it right by then.
That's
so
right.
We'll say Cleveland, and we'll be fact checked later.
So Danae Human actually, started a club for diocesan, people that work with marketing and enrollment and fundraising. And so we've been meeting for over 2 years now, or 3 years.
We have.
And so Christine is also part of that network. And we're just kind of like, always sharing ideas and connecting about things that we want to do, or, things that are working for different dioceses and archdioceses. So that's how we connected. And so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in Catholic education? Why Catholic education?
Yeah, thank you. Really it started, I think, my journey, of course, started as a student going to St. Vincent de Paul in Corning, New York is where I grew up, and that was my first exposure. And, there were very few sisters in the system at that point, but I didn't realize what all that was planting until later. I grew up in a smaller town in upstate New York, and then, but just had this really wonderful Catholic community that surrounded me, through my upbringing. I ended up going to the University of San Francisco. So I just went coast to coast here for college, and had such an interesting experience there, being in such a, urban setting, and West Coast culture and San Francisco culture specifically. And I graduated from the University of San Francisco and was going into teaching. And the funny thing is, I think what really started my career in Catholic schools was I'd been traveling all over that summer, backpacking, no money, staying as cheaply as I can, eating a baguette and a cucumber, along the way. And I got back in August. And I had just graduated, and I was like, I have got to get a job like tomorrow. And I just started looking around, and I started looking in Catholic schools, and I ended up getting my very, very first teaching job out of school was teaching Spanish in Pacific Heights. Funny enough, it was St. Vincent in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. So that got me going, I think, just in Catholic schools in general. And once I got there and was teaching there for a couple of years, and then taught in another school, realized, what, there's some secret sauce here in Catholic education. This is different. My dad was a public school teacher his whole career. So being exposed to that, and, knowing that there's good people in public schools, people working really hard, good families, good educators, but there was just something different about Catholic schools that I actively became a part of, and just realized, wow, it's more than just books, and learning information. This was like a transformative experience. And we were able to support a parent's vision for their family in a very unique way, just through our value-based and through faith guiding everything. It kind of put us all on the same page with all of our differences. So really, it was all of that just really, I think, resonated with me. And I thought, you know what? I think this is my calling. I think this is where I need to be. And while I wouldn't have articulated it that way then, I was just like, hey, but I got a good gig going here. This is working, and I love the people I work with, and the community is wonderful. That was all probably what kept me there long enough to now be able to articulate in the kind of second half of my career that this was really a place I felt like I could contribute and offer my gifts, but that I also felt that I was growing and learning and being transformed, even just in my role today and the families that I encounter and the work that I do, I felt like I'm benefiting from Catholic education even now, which is really kind of, I mean, how many people can say that about their job, really? So
Right.
I feel very blessed in that way. And that's really what keeps me doing what I'm doing.
Was it hard for you
yeah.
to leave like the teaching position to kind of like come in and be in a diocesan role?
Oh, so, okay. I forgot to tell you that little journey here. So, I was teaching. I loved being in the classroom. I was creative. I'm kind of an out of the box kind of person. And I thought, I loved the classroom. And I had stepped away from the classroom. I have 3 children and they were babies at the time. And I took some time off to be home. I was fortunate to be able to do that. And while I was home, I was volunteering for the auction, chairing the auction, organizing volunteers, doing this, and this. And so when I decided, my youngest went back to kindergarten, and I got back to the classroom, we had moved to Eastern Washington for 4 years. And when we moved back to Seattle, I was like, my youngest is in school now full time, maybe it's time to start looking for something. And so the school that my kids had gone to initially before we moved to Eastern Washington for 4 years had 2 positions open, a 5th grade full time and an advancement director, development director. I know people call them different things. And so I thought, well, I'll go ahead and just put my hat in the ring for both. Of course, leaning towards teaching. In fact, let me back up. Actually, I think I just applied for the teaching position. And then when I called, they said, well, we also have this other position available. And I said, tell me about that. And as they described it, I was like, honestly, I think you're going to be able to maximize my gifts at this point in my life with the advancement position. And that started my journey in terms of I was doing enrollment, management, fundraising, grant writing, community engagement. So that's what started me on that. And then, of course, I got recruited there from that school, very successful position for me there for about, I think it was almost 8 years. And they were able to attract me downtown. So I can now work with the 72 plus schools that we have in Seattle. So I think, I have this perspective from all sides of the desk, right? I've been a teacher, I've been a volunteer, a parent, and then moving into more of an administrative capacity, I think has really helped having those different vantage points. But really, I think each of those were an important part of my journey to now being here at the Archdiocese, because I feel like there's some perspective that I've gained. And again, I learn all the time from the people that I serve. So I never consider myself, hey, I know it all. I've got all the answers. Hopefully my role with them is very, very collaborative. Let's sit down. Let's start peeling back the layers of the onion. Let's see what opportunities are in your community that we can identify and then really go after and see if we can move the needle, but always striving to move the needle. We don't want to just be like, oh, we're all feeling good. No, I mean, if we're feeling good, that's great, but where's the next opportunity? And let's just keep going after it. I think that's what's going to move Catholic schools forward.
Going from good to great, right, Mike?
Yeah, well, and if anyone's ever read that book, that's a great call out, Marianela. But I'm also struck by your story, and probably we can talk about the fear of going from one school to 70 plus schools of responsibility at some point. But what's interesting is, and Marianela and I have seen this on our side, is that transition from being in the classroom to being involved in the school. And I've sort of contended, we have a few of our advancement directors here that have done that leap and have been successful. And I think part of that is you have a stake in the school as both a teacher and an advancement director, and you care for the longevity of the school and the success of the school in many capacities. It's just sort of changing gears a little bit. And also you probably have what some like myself who came from the secular world had to learn about education and what's important to people and things of that nature that you already had because you were in the classroom. But what do you think some of those, when you did make that decision and ultimately said, all right, not the 5th grade job, I'm gonna do this development thing and see how this works out. What strengths from the classroom do you think you took to the role that you now have or had and now have here?
Right. One of the things right off the top, and I have an example of why, was, what do we need our prospective families to see in the classroom, right? If they're coming to our schools, we're an educational institution. What do those families need to see happening in our classrooms? And of course, I knew what was happening in my classroom, right? And had a pretty good handle on what my colleagues were doing in their classrooms. And so then I was thinking, gosh, this teacher's so creative. She's looking at alternative seating, instead of everybody in desks, she's looking at, some different opportunities for that. I want to help her get that. We didn't have it in the budget, but you know what? I'm going to go after some funds so that teacher can have the classroom set up that she feels like she can function best in with her students. So we could write a grant to get that. Or another example is middle school. We want to make our middle school, sometimes we have jumping off points in 5th grade. So we want to have our middle school programs, we want those to be very attractive and strong. And so one of the things was, I was like, we live in the Pacific Northwest. When I was a teacher in Eastern Washington, we had a salmon tank. I'm like, this school needs a salmon tank. This is a part of our culture in the Northwest, the salmon and the relationship between salmon and even our Native communities. So what could we do? Like, what could I go after? And then this is good marketing for us, so we're
Right.
fitting a need. We're discovering a need in a classroom that helps our teachers really leverage, their curriculum. And we've now got some things to brag about when we have prospective families. We can really get things, get the positive juices and communications flowing on the soccer field saying, gosh, wasn't that great that they did that salmon project? Or I love the fact that my son, he doesn't sit at the desk. He always has such a hard time, or they have a chair that has a little rubber band at the base so he can, he can move his legs around and still focus on what's happening in the classroom. So I think all of those things, I think being a teacher gave me the insight of really sometimes how limited our resources are in the classroom for our teachers. And so if we provide more, our teachers can really take off. And I think that speaks to teacher retention. We value you. We value your ideas, your curriculum, your creative thinking. We want innovation in our Catholic schools. And sometimes we need resources to do that. So those were just some examples just off the top of my head that I can think of that perspective as a teacher really helped guide my work. Also in terms of parents, when you're a teacher, you often know what parent concerns are, right? They're so you could speak to those in a tour. That was really helpful. Yeah. And I think, many teachers are creative. And I would definitely say this. I love the fact that I was able to have those different opportunities in my career, and I would encourage others that feel moved in that direction to do that. But I would also say that you do need a skill set. I think sometimes, and this is just where my caution, my cautionary tale would be is, sometimes, and it could be even from the parent community, a lot of our schools, we have an open development position. It's part-time. It's hard to find, where it's not necessarily a real high salary. Sometimes those positions are really hard to fill. So sometimes what I see in our schools is like, oh, I've got this really nice parent, this active parent. Let's just put that person in the seat. And I think we do have to be really careful about just not thinking that anybody who loves the school is necessarily going to be able to do this job well. So I think looking, articulating some of the skill sets that we need to have. Just because someone doesn't have experience doesn't mean they're not going to be dynamite, because someone took a chance on me.
Yep.
But,
Right.
but,
Yeah.
and, I felt like I moved into that very naturally, thankfully. But I think sometimes there are misfits. And I think we just have to be really honest about that and just say, maybe your gifts aren't here, but maybe they're here, Yeah. And so just a little caution about that, because these are critical roles. I see development, enrollment, and those are critical roles in the school. And I think sometimes they take a back seat and they're not as prioritized budget-wise, maybe even, and they're not necessarily people that are at the leadership table while they should be, because they have a real pulse on the community. They're engaging and interacting with the community so actively. They are truly your eyes and ears in some ways. And so these are essential and critical staff. So to be able to find those people that have skills, whether they're coming from teaching. I just met with this new development gal, and she's in one of our schools, and she graduated from the school. Now her kids are there, and she's a dynamo. She's never done this. And she called right away and said, hey, let's meet up. We went through a whole bunch of things. And I left that meeting thinking, she's going to knock it out of the park. So I think finding people that are collaborative and can really connect is important.
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Marian. No, go ahead, Marianela.
All right. So I was going to say, you've been in the seat of the advancement director who's local and is doing it at the school level. And, right now you're doing it at the diocesan level, which can be very different because we don't have a school to manage. We are kind of like dealing with so many different schools, and they all have their uniqueness to them. And so there's different ways to approach each one of our schools and the advancement directors, and if they don't have one. So, can you talk about, that difference of being that advancement director at the school versus being the, archdiocesan representative that helps the advancement directors in their roles?
Yes. It was a big difference for me. For one, you're kind of flying at the 30,000 foot level in terms of, you're really seeing, you really see the breadth of practices in our schools. And there's some value to that. And I always think of myself as like a pollinator. I'll see something from this school and then I go over to this school and I'm like, hey, you got to talk to so-and-so. This person has got this great idea or thinking along the lines of what you're suggesting. So I feel like there's some advantages there because you do get to see the breadth of practice, and there's some healthy things and sometimes there's some unhealthy things there. And so then you can kind of dial in and see what you can do to impact some of those opportunities that might be there. But to me, there's two things. One, you just can't get into the depth that you would if you were working at a school, right? So if I was at a school and then I can just, I've got my plan, I work through my plan. Sometimes at my level, I can sit down with the teams, but I'm not the one actually doing the work. And so you can sit down with schools and make suggestions, and then it's really up to them to take the football and run down the field with it. And, sometimes for various reasons, and sometimes really good reasons, there's just not the capacity at that school to be able to do some of those action items. And sometimes that's difficult because that, if this maybe was more of a priority, or if there was an additional person, or there was something, so then maybe you don't see the kind of change that you might like to see them move into. So I think that sometimes can be frustrating there a little bit. But then on the flip side, you do get to see those successes because you get to see so many more. Someone will say, gosh, you know what? I've been using this marketing planning tool, and, here's what I did. And it's like, it warms my teacher heart because then I just think, oh my gosh, my students they're all succeeding. And again, I'm not the expert here, but it makes me really happy to see that collaboration really making some positive change. I do miss, though, like all the little celebrations that you have at the school. I miss that community piece that's so unique to being in a school. Because, getting ready for the Christmas program and all those cute little nativity plays and, getting ready for Catholic Schools Week and all the excitement around that. So I do miss that local culture a little bit. I just get little bits and pieces from all the schools that I visit, which I so value and appreciate.
Yeah, and that brings back to my question too about, you mentioned like the personalities or the strengths and things of the different advancement directors, and you mentioned like you can support and value that, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned sometimes they'll fill a parent in the role and they're passionate about the school, but they don't maybe have the skill set. And I wonder, because we do this in our role a little bit, and we know. This is sort of a leading question if we were in a courtroom, because I do know somewhat of the answer to this a little bit. But in terms of those folks, you just mentioned collaboration, but also, how do you help the different teachers? What are some of the ways that you, as you're in your role, help these, new development and advancement folks or the principals, the constituents that you deal with on a daily basis, what's your sort of go-to welcome package, right? Of, okay, you're starting with the school. Here's what we're going to do. This is what you do for this, or here's some suggestions. Here's a resource. How do you kind of help get all that together so it's not this sort of overwhelming, where do I begin feeling when they get there, in their role?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And the first thing I try to do is meet with them, because I feel like all good work starts with relationship. And even though I have 72, I mean, that's a decent amount when it's just me, I do, and it does mean travel. If I have to drive down towards Portland, that's 4 hours for me, or, a couple hours north. But it is a priority to me to meet with them in person, because I feel like everything starts with relationship. And by making that time, I feel like now they know who I am and we can establish a relationship. And so then when I share things, it's different than if I was just, that person downtown, So that is a number one priority for me. And then second to that, usually when I meet with them, I just want to hear about them and how they found the school, what's their background. And then I approach it like, hey, I want to share with you some resources that are available to you. And I have built a marketing portal. Marianela knows about this because we talked about it in our small group. Yes. And it's still, it's a work in progress. So sometimes I wish I had more time to just do that all day, but I squeeze that in as much as I can in terms of adding new resources. But I sit down with them and say, okay, let's log on to mycatholicschool.org. Then we're going to go to 4 Catholic schools, slide down to Marketing, Advancement, and Enrollment, and that is the marketing portal. And then I just show them, it's really laid out pretty clearly where they can, if they want to look at some previously recorded professional development, they can do that. If they need some marketing resources, boom, they're there. So the first step is to just say, this is your space. And I'm adding things. This is for you to do whatever you wish with. And then, so that's usually how this whole thing starts. That's usually the welcome protocol, getting them, on. And I made my marketing portal. There's no login required. So anyone in New Jersey could log in and take a look at those resources. And so anyway, and then as I began to get out into the schools, and then I just schedule school visits where I'll just pop in. How are things going? Questions for me. And I just look at those as collaboration sessions. Mm-hmm. And then often what I'll do based on my meeting is I'll say, gosh, you know what? The last 3 schools that I visited have had this struggle. Is there something I could build? Is there something I can create that would help address that? So I do a lot of Canva templates, and then I share the Canva template link so they can use the tool, customize it with their school colors or whatever they want to do with it, and make it their own. So really, I guess I'm going the route of teaching how to fish, because obviously I can't come in and do the work because there's just not enough of me to go around. But more importantly, these folks in these roles are really hungry for some guidance. There's not a lot of PD. We have PD for teachers. We have structure for principals, but these essential roles aren't always supported through professional development. And so being able to provide some of those resources and then connecting them has really been invaluable. I do a monthly, usually twice a month, I have a Zoom PD. I record it so people can access that later. And then I also now knew this year I did a collab. I call it a collab group. So 30 minutes, last Thursday of the month, anybody that wants to pop in, talk about anything. I have a guide of some topics, but we can go off the grid. And frankly, what's so fun about it is I haven't had one that has lasted only 30 minutes. We usually push to 45, but people can jump off whenever they need to. So again, it's just a place where they could just be vulnerable a little bit and say, I don't know what to do here. And I always say, that is okay. In fact, that's huge. The fact that what you need to learn or where you need some support. And I think that's just that type of honesty and transparency, I think, is key to be able to moving schools forward.
I have to ask, have you had a success story from this, formula? Have you seen anything in one of your schools that, I probably myself selfishly point to something one of our school students, oh, I helped them with that idea. Maybe it's just to myself, but there's a joy in that I was able to help them move that needle forward, right? Or help them hone in on the work. Have you seen anything in a really good success story from this formula?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things, and again, when I think about these resources, I mean, yes, I'm actually doing the design, but it's been the schools that have helped me build this. Like, they're a part of this. It's not me and coming up with all this stuff. It's like these schools have been played an active role in the development of these resources. So I feel like it's a team effort with these resource assets. So here's one that I recently, because I just was at a school, actually at a couple schools, and every time they pulled it out. So I created a planning template, and it's a year at a view. It's very visual. And then you can block off, there's different on the left, different horizontal bands. So admissions, marketing, communications, fundraising, so there's 3 big bands. And what you do is you add in what all your events are in each of those categories so that you have a bird's eye view of, whoa, you know what? Number one, we have way too much going on in November. Let's spread this out a little bit. Or, you know what? We have all these fundraising events and we only have 2 community events that are serving, community building. And so really quickly, that tool brings teams together in those different roles to sit down and say, how are we going to organize this year? And what can we move? What do we need to add? Then if you're admissions specifically, and you need 2nd and 3rd graders and middle schoolers, then you look at that calendar and say, what could we push in to our schedule that wouldn't, necessarily conflict with all these others, but complement, that we could really hone in on some of these grades that we need to build some enrollment around. So that tool, I mean, now, do I have any data right now that says, okay, great, we've increased enrollment because of that tool? I don't know if I could draw that line to that tool, but I can say our overall, like Marianela, our overall enrollment, I mean, we've had an upward trajectory for the last 3 years. And we were in a 2.5 deficit year over year for probably the last 20. So that's not just these tools. It's a lot of different things coming together, but it just shows it's perfect timing from a Catholic school perspective to be innovative and to start thinking about planning. And it's good timing. It's now. And so I would say something's working. Maybe it's all these things put together that's keeping us, and we're in a very secular part of the country in the Pacific Northwest. So this is really, really good news for us.
So, there's not every diocese or maybe the archdiocese do, but not every diocese actually has, a full staff Office of Catholic Education with somebody like you and myself and Mike that are available to, help our Catholic schools. In your view, what does it mean, for a diocese that actually, has somebody in that role? And what does that mean for the schools and for the community?
I think it's so important. I really do. And I'm not just saying that to justify my position or yours or Mike's. I truly, but this will justify it anyway, right? It's just like in a school, we have to prioritize admissions and marketing. The world is different than it was 50 years ago, 25 years ago, even, right? And if we want innovation in our schools, they need some supports and they need some collaboration partners. They really do. You can get siloed really easily in Catholic schools. And so to be able to have someone that can jump in and also, I think, again, the 30,000 foot perspective is really helpful because you can see, when a school's like, oh gosh, we could never do enrollment that way. So, well, you know what? Actually, we have 3 schools just north of you that are doing it very successfully. Maybe you could talk to them, and see what that looks like. So to be able to connect schools, I think having a role like ours that's really pushing in and out of so many different schools with different practices, there's some wisdom that we learn of just, wow, all of these schools that have waiting lists are doing these things. There's some things that we can learn just because we're able to see all this play out and we have the data. and they can share the data with us. So I think it is really important. I think it also sends a message that enrollment is important, and enrollment needs to be on everybody's radar. Sometimes we can get so buried in the academics, and while those are great, if you don't have any students to serve, so that enrollment piece and that marketing piece and communications piece, that's newer for Catholic schools historically, right? I mean, your parish families aren't necessarily pouring into your Catholic schools. The value of a Catholic and faith-based education maybe isn't there in some parts of the world. All the more reason why we need to do a good job attracting these families for that evangelization piece.
Right. There's so many channels now too, right? I mean, there's so much noise. I tell our schools all the time. I mean, there's just so much noise out there now, and it's coming from everywhere, right? When I was growing up and going to Catholic school, your parish was right next to the school a lot of the time, right? There was a church and the school was right there. If you lived in that area, that's where you went, or you were only rarely in a different school from your town if there wasn't a school there, right? Which was rare.
Right.
But now that's a different world, and there's a lot of messages coming at everybody from a lot of different directions. And so you've got to get into I've been using this phrase recently. You got to get into the fight. Yeah, you have to stand out. You have to give that value proposition. I mean, we're in that time period, and that's the reality. And I do think I'm going to add on the value, I think, not all the time, but the value that we have in our offices of time to sit and do these websites and these projects and the Canva ads and the things because the reality is in the school level, people are busy. They might be subbing for one period. They might be getting ready for an event. They might be, doing any number of things. And so for us to be there for them to say, here's a trend that's happening on social media. We think your school is great fit to do this, or how can I help you get yourself rolling with this initiative, and let me look some things up for you. That kind of stuff has just been, I have seen the impact on stuff for them. And I think everything that you said as well is just, gives value to not just our positions. Again, I'm not going to sit and try to defend our positions, but just to have someone there. And like you said, I think the perception also is, if there's a person in that position working there, this diocese cares about it, right? This diocese wants that to be successful. They understand this is a need, because I've gone to the Partners in Mission conference, and Marianela has gone to a number of conferences. And I know, Kristin, you have your own, which we'll talk about, at some point. Yes,
which you should come to.
Yeah, we are finding our way. I'm going to hitchhike. I think Marianela is going to take it. I'm going to ride the rails.
Marianela, I'm hoping, is going to be one of my speakers. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think that was the word. But I think
it's cooking.
But I interacted with so many people who said, "Oh my God, you work for the diocese? We don't have that." Right. And, and ran into people. And so that's why, I mean, that's one of the other things I just, appreciate about my position here, is that there's places where it doesn't exist. And there's a value in what I'm doing, and should be proud, but also work hard to keep it, because
I think every day, like, how can I bring value? Really? I mean, I think because, what can we do? That's why the great things about those Canva templates, they don't have to create it. They don't have to start from scratch. They just go in, pull out our logo, put in theirs, change the color, easy, done. What can we do? What value can we bring to our schools to help increase their efficiencies? And I see the tools being used in the school, and it's exciting, because I think that it really says to me, keep developing tools, relevant tools, right? Relevant. Right. They have to be something that they are interested in using. I just mailed out, and Marianela, you should be getting it in the next week or so, the Catholic Schools Week kits for this year. So I do Seattle, we do our own poster, because, a lot of times, and again, NCA does an amazing job. I always refer to their ideas. But it's the same graphic year over year. And I'm like, you know what, we gotta spice this up a little. So we do our own poster. You'll get it. I think I sent 3 of them to you, Marianela. And then I do a whole packet of ideas for Catholic Schools Week. Like, here's something you could do to honor your priest. Here's something to honor your teachers and staff. Here's a fun thing to honor your students and your families and your donors and your volunteers. And so I actually make samples. Like, this goes, again, this is so much of how my educational training in the background, I'm making these kits. I make samples of everything. So you're going to get a whole bunch of good snacks to share with your office, Marianela, but with Catholic messages and fun, great creative ideas that they could use or edit or customize to their school community. So I just sent out a whole bunch. I just sent out Marianela a box. So you can see they look like big pizza boxes. And everyone in the UPS store always gives us kind of the evil eye when we walk in with, 70. And this year it was 77 boxes to mail.
Wow.
But we're getting it more streamlined with one of our local UPS stores. So anyway, but those, again, gives people ideas. And I guess I'm constantly trying to challenge schools to just be innovative, think out of the box, try something new. I think we need that. And I think it's out there. I think we have really creative, daring people in our school communities, and we just need to connect. And then we need to really amplify similar message nationally, so that when someone's at a Christmas party in Catholic schools come up, there's some recognition of what does that mean? So I love to get our national voice. I think we've talked about that in our smaller PLC group. It's just, how do we get that national conversation so that all of our schools have a value proposition? Now, it can be very localized, certainly in their own communities, but that the Catholic school brand has some legs,
and that perfect. There's some. I'm sorry to interrupt, Kristin, but no. I was kind of like thinking exactly along the line of that branding and what that means at the diocesan level, and even nationally. We have the support of NCA that's doing amazing work in supporting Catholic education, across the country. And so when it comes to, the noise that is out there, like Mike mentioned, the noise and all the competition, around the country that we have as Catholic schools, and how do we stand out? What do you see, you're doing in the diocese as establishing that brand and standing out amongst others?
I would say, I always give this example of just, when so many schools say mind, body, and spirit, and it just is too vague for today's modern parent, what does that really mean? And so I always really challenge them to be more specific. One school I was visiting just had one that was Saints and Scholars, which was kind of a cute, catchy, something different. But I think, high level, here are some of the things. Our kind of tagline for the Archdiocese of Seattle is reaching higher. Catholic schools reaching higher, right? We're always striving. We haven't arrived. We're not perfect. We haven't, but we are always striving. We're always moving forward, right? And some of those, I think, more detailed or more concrete examples would be, partners, parents as partners, families as partners in education. I think that's a huge thing that resonates in our country right now. That we're not leaving them out of the educational conversation. We need them, right? And we know just statistically I'm talking an academic side, teacher side here, that we know when parents are involved in the education of their children, there's more successful outcomes, right? So that is a fact. And so we want to make sure that parents know that there are partners in their education, right? We absolutely want people to know that we are guided by a Catholic worldview, right? And what that looks like in the modern world. Sometimes that's tricky, to kind of figure out what exactly is that, but I think we have some amazing leaders that we can not be afraid to share that part of who we are. There's sometimes I think, especially in the Pacific Northwest, there's such a, the mountains are people's religion, the water, and, that's where they spend their Sundays. And so, there's a real opportunity for some of those families to see what faith looks like, and how that's practiced in a family and how that's supported at school. So I think there's a huge opportunity in communicating our faith, but in a very contemporary way. I'm not saying we're changing anything. I'm just saying the way we deliver it needs to be in a way that's welcoming to a modern family, and a multicultural family. That's the other piece. We need to start really, reaching out in an authentic way to our brothers and sisters in different cultural communities.
Yeah.
And
it's true.
There might be some things that have to change in order to be more welcoming.
Yeah.
So, and finally, we have academics. Like, we've got to be excellent.
Yeah.
We say excellence education, we got to mean it and we got to prove it.
Yep. And share those facts, right? I mean, like we've talked about, like the simple infographics that point those numbers out there. And, and it's funny you mention all those things that, the parents as partners and we hear a lot of times, like, how do we combat what's going on in the, from our schools? What can we do in this climate we're in right now? And without going after whatever, this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, just what you said, just point out what we're doing, and point out things, there's that people want stuff, right? They want they want these things to be told to them, right? The easier it is for them to get the information, the happier they are. And so if you can say, hey, your kid's going to get accountability, discipline, good education, sports, whatever these factors are. And we can point these out in imagery and video and fun things. I mean, it's going to resonate with people, right? I always go back to sometimes just the idea of pointing out that we're in uniforms every day and the responsibility of being well dressed and put together is a huge value point for people. It was when I was in school, and it is now for people, and you can show that easily with kids in their uniforms. That's not hard to put together. Some of the stuff is easier than we, I think conceptually. We think this is just mentioned it now, it's a high mountain to climb, but at times it's not. At times we can make it simple for people, and it brings that passion to do it and bring them back and allow them to come in the way that they want to. You mentioned your tagline. One of the ones we've played with a little bit, some of our social, is you belong in South Jersey Catholic schools, right? So there's like the action of belong, you're meant to be here, but also belonging, like as a greater Catholic community. And I think that's similar to yours. We're not telling you anything in particular, but we're just allowing you to take that as you would like, and I think that's important in this day and age.
And I think it's kind of like, valuable that, a lot of us who work in these roles also have children that, are part of our Catholic schools. Yep. And we know as parents what we're looking for as parents. And it just kind of like serves in our roles to be able to come up with strategies that address those needs and those wants as parents that we have for our own children. So we're not kind of like doing anything that we wouldn't want for our own children. We want those things happening in all of our Catholic schools that we want for all of us. And everybody may have like unique ideas of what that means, but I think it all plays out really well when it comes to developing the strategies to increase enrollment in our schools, and to also not only increase enrollment, but talk about retention and just keeping those children in our schools, not only the children, but their families happy, learning and feeling love, which is,
I just want to second that, Marianela. That is so, so true. And actually the focus of my, my kits that you're going to get was, acknowledging our current families and thanking the kids for being there, too, our donors. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's the best marketing money we spend is internal marketing, because there's internal and there's external, and we do know that word of mouth marketing is probably still number one in terms of our Catholic school, recruitment. So, and be intentional about acknowledging those different constituents that are the inside marketer, that's the inside marketing strategy. And that's so important. And so that's something I articulated to our school, sending this out, that some of these fun little things, like they might think, oh, what's the point? It resonates. I was meeting with a principal yesterday, and we were talking about, retention, that very thing. And she was talking about how she was meeting with families who were requesting tuition assistance. And I said, how great would it be to just make contact with every single family at one point during the year. Just call to check in. How are you? I mean, do you know how meaningful that would be? And I know some of our schools, like we have some big schools. So, there's 400 students or so. I mean, that's a lot of phone calls, but you could recruit, from your school commission and have a few other people making calls as well. But to just a personal touch, we're in a digital age, and that personal touch is more important than ever. So to pick up the phone and say, I'm going to make, I have 400 students, I've got 250 families. I'm going to make a phone call to each family and just check in. I mean, that alone would be huge, plus some of these other pieces.
Yeah, and that they're not in trouble when the principal calls.
Right,
That's a nice
right. It's a positive. And you'll learn stuff.
Message.
Maybe they are struggling, and maybe that gave you the opportunity to find something out that you wouldn't have known about that could have impacted their re-enrollment. Yeah,
and it felt close. It felt, if it wasn't transactional, it was
organic. It's organic and authentic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We've been talking about this, how our schools can be better with the work we do as diocesan representatives, right? But, one of the things is our volunteers. For those parents who are not working for Catholic schools right now, but they're part of our environment, they're part of our schools, what would you tell them as far as being volunteers in our schools and what that does?
We need you. We need you. We value you. And that is what Catholic schools, that's what keeps us going. It's the fuel. I mean, it's the volunteer core, the crew that we have as volunteers. That's what Catholic schools are known for. That's what's moved them forward all these years. And we need you. We still need you. And thank you.
I think that's a great, I think we could talk for hours on this,
know.
And we do. I think, and that's probably why the monthly meeting that we have is so successful. It's part therapy group, but also collaborative in nature. But it's just an ability to talk these things out and really come together as a community. We're getting ready to wrap up. So I personally want to say thank you. It was awesome to spend some time talking to you on a level where, we're in the workplace, and it's going to be heard by a lot of people. And I hope it resonates with some of our folks in this area, but hopefully we can get this out even larger. And so on my part, thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to work with you. Absolutely steal all of your ideas and bring them over here.
Absolutely.
And as we are, Marianela and I are sort of you're the combo, one single person of us being able to do that is exceptional. So I thank you for joining us today and being a part of the podcast.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Kristin. It was a pleasure to have you.
Great to be here.
Yeah. But as we're wrapping up, can you mention that your site where the resources were one more time for us?
Yes. So it's very easy. mycatholicschool.org.
Perfect.
Then you're going to go under the header, the menu link for Catholic schools. And in that same line, you go right down from the header, you will see Marketing, Enrollment, and Advancement. And that is our Seattle Arch marketing portal. Any of the resources there, feel free to use, edit, customize. It's all for Catholic schools, for national. If we can share, we're happy to.
Sharing is caring.
That's right.
Well, thank you again, Marianela. Thank you as always for guiding this ship with me as we do another podcast and get ready for an exciting season. We've got Advent coming up, and before we know it, the traditional sort of Catholic Schools Week will be here. So I think you and I deserve a nap or something to get ourselves geared up for that. So thank you to the listeners for listening to us this week. And we'll be back next week with another great episode of Talking Catholic. So thank you very much.